Hello, everybody. We're live. Let's do this. I hope you're well this Friday. Welcome to the Conscious Together live stream. I am Lorien, and we are going to do some mindfulness together and make some mindful reflection. So I hope you'll enjoy me on this journey and take a little time out of your day wherever you are, whatever time it is where you are. It's lunchtime here. I'm in the UK. It's a rather warm day here, a little bit humid. We do like to complain about the weather here in the UK. So whether it's sunny or whether it's raining, then we're sure to point out what's wrong with it. So we can do that mindfully, and that's then okay. So today's theme is going to be about what we don't say and why that is so significant and so powerful in respect of our communication with ourselves and, more importantly, in this context, with each other. So we're going to do some reflections on this and hopefully gain some insights into the nature of our mind and the nature of our communication. And of course, we're going to do some mindfulness practices together, and the invitation is open for you to join in with them if you wish to, as long as they feel okay for you. With all these practices, find somewhere to sit or lie comfortably, where you can be safe and undisturbed for the period of the time that you have available to you today. You can do all the practices with eyes open or eyes closed, as you prefer. And sometimes there's a benefit to doing practice with eyes open. It can bring it more into the real world, so to speak. When we really need mindfulness most, our ability to meditate on being in the moment, we will normally have our eyes open. We might be in a supermarket queue getting frustrated because we're running late. We might be stuck in traffic. We might be having a difficult conversation with someone in our professional or personal lives. And those are the times that we most need to bring the skill of mindfulness forward. So sometimes getting used to practicing with eyes open can really support that development, that integration of your mindfulness skill into your day-to-day life. That said, eyes closed meditation is also very important to help focus on other aspects of consciousness and to close out the distractions of the visual field around. So the invitation is open however you want to proceed with that. And I'd encourage you, when you're doing your meditation practices, to experiment both with eyes open and with eyes closed and see how you find it. As always, if you've got any questions, send them through to the Conscious Together email address or drop them to me in the chat, and I will endeavour to support them, particularly if they're mindfulness questions. If they're not mindfulness questions, we might need to be selective. We'll see what happens and how things go. So, with that said, what we'll do first is we'll just do a quick grounding meditation just to bring us into this space, be about 5 minutes or so. So hopefully you'll find it focusing. We shall see. So position yourself wherever you are, whether you're sitting or lying. And if you're sitting, see if you can rest your feet on the floor. And that doesn't matter whether you're in shoes or whether you've got bare feet or socks on, whatever it is. Just try and rest those feet gently on the floor. Hands can be positioned in your lap if that's comfortable, or resting on a desktop, as mine are in this case, as I need to be close to my computer for what's going on here. And gently bring your attention to the experience of the breath at the tip of the nose. See how closely you can focus and be present with the felt sensations of the breath there. See if you can let go of the chatter of the mind for the next few minutes, resolving as best you can to being present with this experience. Notice the rhythm of the breath coming in and out through the nose. Whether it's deep or shallow, and whether it's smooth or a little irregular. And perhaps simply whether the experience of observing the breath, being present with the breath, is pleasant or challenging. See if there's any inclination to adjust the breath, to change the rhythm, slow it down perhaps, take deeper, longer breaths. Just see if that's true for you and simply acknowledge that. Just note that. And note any frustration or sense that the breath isn't right just the way it is. That we must be breathing in a certain way to meditate, breathing in a certain way to get the best benefit, breathing in a certain way to get the maximum result. Just gently check if that's true for you. And again, simply note that experience. See if you can embrace it without judgment, without criticism. And gently focusing on the sensations at the tip of the nose. Without describing with language, pay attention to the actual sensations. How is this as a felt experience? And of course, the temptation is always there to narrate our experience. And indeed, there's language being used to describe the process. The invitation to explore has to be through language, through words. But once the guidance is given and understood as best we can, just see if we can let go of the language and be with the direct physical experience and sensation. And so gently start to move the body, bring yourself a little bit back to life as best you can. Maybe have a little stretch, wiggle your fingers or your toes, have a little sip of water if that feels right to do so. And just take a moment and check in with how you're doing right now, where your mind's at, what thoughts are pushing their way in, whether it's the future, the past, something random that's going on in our mind at this moment in time. And just check in with that. Check in with how that practice felt for you, whether it felt easy and intuitive, whether it was perhaps restful, or it could have been frustrating, difficult. And again, there's no right answer here. The invitation is to explore what's true for you, your experience, and then to see if there's anything that can be learnt about the nature of your mind in this experience itself. So thank you. So I've been reading a very interesting book, and I'm still picking my way through it, so I haven't finished it, called The User Illusion by a Danish science journalist by the name, which I'm about to butcher, so my sincere apologies, Tor Neeratranders. I think I nailed that. And he looks at the science of the physics and the maths research that has been going on for the last 150 years or so into the nature of consciousness and trying to understand it and to measure it from a scientific perspective, from the position of the hard sciences of maths and physics. And the lens that I want to explore some of this really interesting text, and I do encourage you to check it out if you want to. It can be a little bit heavy to start with. It was for me, because I'm not massively sciencey based, particularly in the fields of physics and maths, I'm afraid to say. But he does try and make it as accessible as possible. But there's lots of very interesting realizations in there from these fields and the research that's been done through the decades on this. And the thing that I want to sort of focus on, the theme of today, is the fact that our communication is mostly unsaid. And this comes from the fact that we take in, and the receptors of our body, the sensory receptors, our sight, our ears, our skin, our nose, etc., our taste buds, are receiving in total in the region of 11 million bits of information every second. 11 million bits, which is a fairly massive amount. The world's a big place. There's lots going on, even in this little space that I'm sat in, staring at a camera, talking to you. There is 11 million bits of data, more or less, give or take, being received into the sensors, the sensory organs, the nerves of my body, and being fired up into my brain. The really interesting thing is that our consciousness, our active, focused attention, our awareness of being aware, can only process somewhere in the region of 10 bits per second. So that's 1,000,000 times less data being processed in our active consciousness than is going on around us. That's a pretty weighty conclusion. And it's been repeated through numerous scientific experiments across the decades, and appears to be at the moment, as far as science goes, because science is always being updated, right? It is the field of exploration. And a theory only stands as long as it is successfully tested, until something else supersedes it. So this is the position here and now, to the best of my knowledge. But yeah, so that's a massive difference between all the data that's around us, all the data that's actually coming into us, and then the data that's actually being processed by our conscious mind, the data that we can actually focus on being aware of consciously, directly aware of. So what does this mean for our communication? Well, it means that actually what's happening is that information is essentially discarding everything that we know or we think we know. So what happens is when we find something that we are confident of, and this is typically all subconsciously happening, right? This is not a conscious process, but we disregard the known. So when we're describing a situation to each other, and I think for my my preamble, if you saw it on social media, I used the example of describing a cow in a field. So if I say to you, I have just seen a cow in a field, then you will imagine a cow and you will imagine a field, but you won't imagine my cow in my field. And I won't take the trouble to explain to you what a cow is, because I will assume as a known that you already know what a cow is, and that our understanding of a cow is more or less the same. And the same with the field. I will assume that you understand what a field is, so I won't need to describe what a field is, and I probably won't go into much detail, if any at all, about what's in the field or what it looks like. But what will happen in my mind and in the mind of the person that I'm communicating with is that all these other thought processes will kick in and imagine that field. So repopulate missing information that's deemed to be sufficiently important. We don't like gaps, right? If I tell you I'm moving house, you might have never seen my house and you won't know where I'm moving to, but you will automatically imagine some kind of experience of where I live now, and you will imagine the experience of where I might be living in the future. And our minds do this all the time. And this is really important to realize. And it might sound, and this is always the way of these things, right? They sound obvious and in a sense intuitive. And you, well, duh, obviously I don't know what your house looks like, and my brain creates a picture, but we don't behave or act typically like that's going on. What we imagine, we allow to be real to us, right? We let that become our reality. We let that become our definition of the cow, of the field, of the house, and also of our relationships, our definition of each other, our definition of what we're communicating to each other. And it's obviously impossible to have a conversation, or very difficult. And I suppose this has been explored with podcasts and long podcasts with people like Jocko Willink and Joe Rogan, who regularly do 2.5, 3 hour conversations with people so that we can actually, as best as possible, really understand people's perspectives and what's going on. But actually, most of our time, most of our lives, we're having very brief conversations with people. In the professional space, we probably have scant minutes to understand an issue, to translate an issue to each other, to move forward with something. We don't have 3 hours to explore every incident. And also in our personal lives, when we are communicating with each other, the time spent is often a fraction of what might be optimal. And we don't necessarily want to be transcribing every aspect of reality to each other, but sometimes it's far more important that we are explaining what's going on. And when our communications break down, when our relationships break down, then invariably a inadequate communication style is to blame. And I think a lot of our mental health problems, issues, are to do with our inability to express what we're feeling inside to the outside world in a manner that can be understood. And it sounds really easy. And again, you think, well, it's obvious. I just need to tell people how I'm feeling. But actually, that in itself is really complicated. And actually explaining how we're feeling, and possibly even getting to the why, how we're feeling, that's another layer of the onion of complication here, is far more difficult than you realize. Think about how many conversations you've really had that were difficult but focused on moving a relationship forward. Really think about that, because most of the time we get frustrated, we get overly emotional, we feel that we can't express ourselves or that we're not being understood. And sometimes that's because the other person isn't interested, and that's a separate problem. But all being equal, if you've got someone who would, in an ideal world, like to have a more effective relationship with you, then being heard, being able to articulate yourself, yeah, it's very appropriate fumble over that word there, articulate yourself in a way in which people can understand you, is crucial. And that's where this understanding of all the information we drop becomes far more important, because we do have this incredible tendency to assume that other people are mind readers, and that we can read other people's minds. And seldom is that the case. We don't know what everyone else is thinking, and they don't know what we're thinking. So I'll pause for breath there. There's a lot of information there, and there's some more things that I want to try and come back to if we can. But we'll do another practice so that I'm not waxing lyrical this whole time. So we'll do another mindful meditation whilst that information settles through our consciousness into our unconscious processes. And then we'll see where the conversation leads us next. So take a seat again if you're not already sitting, or whether you're lying down. And if you're in a place that you can do so, let the eyes gently close if you're happy to do so. If you're sitting, try and rest your feet gently and flat on the floor, and adopt as best you can an upright, dignified posture. So sitting a little bit taller with the shoulders gently relaxed and down. Make sure you do what's right for your body. So if you need to sit in a particular way to be comfortable and to ensure that you're not straining your body unnecessarily, then make sure that you please do that. And once again, focus the attention on the breath, this time in the tummy. So just feeling the belly moving gently in and out. And notice the movement, the change in pressure all around. So into the lower back, as well as the fronts, and also movement in the sides. You might feel the changing sense of pressure down into the pelvis, the hips, and up under the rib cage also. See if you can fall into that experience, just dropping your conscious awareness within the experience of the tummy itself. Once again, the invitation is to be with a direct experience, the felt sensations, things such as the tingling, the pressure, temperature, and the space between, the absence of noticeable sensation. And if the mind is chattering away, just note it, where it's taking you, whether it's a path you would choose to follow and go along with if you were making a discerning choice. And then just drop back into the experience of the belly as it breathes. Begin again. And one of the key things to focus on with mindfulness practice is not being in a place of still, undisturbed by thought. The trick, for want of a better word, is noticing when you're distracted and lost by thought and beginning again. Just noticing the mesmerizing nature of thought itself, the stickiness of it. And just gently letting go of its spell and beginning again. So simply resting in the space of the abdomen, feeling the movements of the front, the back, and the sides. Again, the invitation is to let go of the language, let go of the descriptive terms, and notice how this actually is. Letting that sensation, that experience be within the space of consciousness, not the narrator, not the descriptive terms. And if you've been snared by thought, just note it. Be curious about where it was taking you. And let go back to the tummy. And when you're ready, just gently coming back to the space you're in, taking a minute to open the eyes, have a little stretch if that feels appropriate. Have a little drink, perhaps. And once again, check in with how that experience felt. Whether it was pleasant, whether it was unpleasant, whether the mind was settled or distracted, and whether there was any opportunity to understand or observe the nature of the mind itself, of our thought patterns, of our feelings in the body, of our emotions that maybe are associated. And maybe there wasn't anything obvious that came up, and that's okay too. We're just being curious, kindly detectives to the experience of our minds, our bodies, our consciousness as best we can. Thank you. So we were talking earlier about the fact that there are 11 million bits of data coming into us from our various sensory organs every second, and that these are processed unconsciously within the mechanisms of our brains, our minds, and that only somewhere in the region of 10, 11 bits, some estimates suggest up to 40, some as low as 5, but somewhere in the region of 10 bits of data, 11 bits of data, 1/1,000,000th of the data coming in is able to be processed within the conscious part of our minds any second. And that the mind filters based on what it thinks it knows about a situation. And we describe the situation of the cow. I won't describe a cow to you unless I thought it was a particularly fascinating cow in any detail. I won't explain to you what a cow is. Of course, if I'm dealing with a very young child who's never encountered a cow before, or someone from a country that doesn't have cows, then perhaps obviously a different conversation would take place. But in the general context of the day-to-day communication we have with most of the people that we come across in our lives, we are not explaining everything or anything at great length whatsoever. So what that means for our communication is that our brains are building up these maps, these pictures. We can't cope with gaps. We can't have absent information. And the fact that our consciousness just processes the word cow means that our subconscious will pull up lots of information about what we know about cows. And it might pull up some interesting facts. It might pull up that we're terrified of cows, and it might then make us react in a way that makes us feel uncomfortable. We might feel clammy-handed, tight stomach, tight throat. We might feel really uncomfortable. Or we might have a really warm, fuzzy feeling about cows, in which case it'll feel pleasant instead. All this will happen in the blink of an eye and will happen entirely unconsciously, but it will completely influence how we feel and the ongoing nature of thoughts that are associated. If you think that you're reaching into the archive, you're doing a Google search into your mind and you type in cow, you're going to get a lot of stuff coming up, right? So that's essentially what happens with our mind, and you never know what's going to pop into your head. It's an interesting experiment into the not controlling our thoughts through this conscious process of our mind. So all this is super important for our communication with each other, because we, as I say, although that might sound obvious and intuitive as we discuss it today, we don't act like it's obvious and intuitive. We assume and we expect that people will know what we're talking about. That when I describe a cow, you are thinking of a cow in more or less exactly the same way. And now that doesn't really matter in descriptive terms of cows too much, too often for most of us. But when we are having conversations about our feelings, about our relationships, our work relationships, our work endeavors, then actually it's far more crucial. And I mean, in design and design and engineering processes, so many times people think that other people understand them, and they go off and they build something in a certain way or make something do a certain thing, and then they come back to the drawing table with this happy face on saying, look what I've done, and the architect looks at them in dismay and is like, that's not what I wanted at all, or the functionality isn't what was imagined, etc., etc. And this is evidence of this creating things in our minds based on our maps, based on the information that we hold unconsciously to be true, to be probably immutable and not interesting, not relevant. So there's a lot going on there. So that's the invitation today, really, is to reflect on that. And if you've got time and inclination, it's really worth picking up a copy of Tor Nir-Tranda's, I'm sure I nailed that again, book, The User Delusion. It's fascinating. As I say, I'm about halfway through at the moment, and already it's got me completely hooked and pressing my way through the sometimes challenging concepts that are going on there. So there you are. How is your communication, guys? Where do you stumble in your relationships, your communication professionally or personally? Feel free to drop a comment in the chat if you're feeling brave, or send us a message directly at the Conscious Together website, and I will add a link once this stream is over so you can connect with us. And you can do it anonymously. We can talk about this next time, but keep your name out of it if you wish to remain private and anonymous. That's perfectly acceptable. So, questions, comments, like, share, please join us in this conversation. What else would you like to hear about? What else would be helpful for you in your journey to mindfulness and helping you communicate more effectively with yourself and with those you care about? So that's it. So thank you. I'm Lorien. This has been Conscious Together. And I hope if you're watching this on the Friday as we're live, then I hope you have an amazing weekend. And we will see you soon. Take care.